Hello, everyone, once again, welcome to Infinite Discoveries, where we explore world affairs, philosophy, history, the social and behavioral sciences, spirituality, arts, and culture with academics, scholars, activists, and visionaries. As always, we are your three happy hosts, respectively, Rich Brago, Miguel Rodriguez, and Aurobindo Mahapatra. If you want to put further faces to the names, feel free to visit our website, infinitediscoveries.org. And if you want to look for me specifically, search for the good-looking guy. Speaking of which, today we have an even better-looking guy who we are honored to have with us, Herbert P. Ricardo, Dr. Herbert P. Ricardo, professor at Indian River State College, among other things. And unlike me, Herb is not just another pretty face. He is a very accomplished professional and academician with a lot of very interesting resume points to his credit. Herb was, welcome Herb. Herb was born in New York, a little town next to, one town over from mine, raised in Ware, England, and now resides in Port St. Lucie, Florida. He spent a decade as a healthcare administrator and consultant for public services, business, and educational institutions prior to assuming his role in the academy at Indian River State College, where he was originally a Marilyn C. Link Endowed Teaching Chair and is currently Professor of Organizational Behavior, Management, and International Business. He is also a visiting and adjunct professor of International Trade and Commerce at Czech University of Life Sciences in Prague, Czechoslovakia, where he has part-time residence. How cool is that? And he is the founder and CEO of KIME Training and Consulting, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. He's lectured widely on the holistic approach to work and its value to organizations and communities. And his recent book, Balance, Work, and Culture in the 20th Century, How Work Defines Us and Shapes Our Society, is his latest contribution to the field. His main areas of research are organizational culture, attitudes and expectations of employees and employers, as well as business and professional ethics, all within a comparative international context. Most recently, he's been examining issues concerning why people don't like to go to work, which is personally applicable to me. I know my wife will confirm that. The Great Resignation, what's come to be known as quiet quitting, which my recent research has uncovered. There's also a related topic of quiet firing that has garnered lots of media attention lately, as well as traditional capital ethics versus corporate social responsibility and international comparative views and approaches to this. So that was a pretty exhausting introduction. Sorry to make you sit through that, Herb, but welcome to the show and thanks for taking the time to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. It's great having you here. So I thought, and feel free anybody to jump in if you want to correct or edit what I'd like to start out talking about, just because it is so interesting and relevant and in the media so much, I hear about it anyway, are these two phenomenon that have come to be known as the Great Resignation, right, over the last 2 years, and then quiet quitting, which is another interesting pop phenomenon over the last few years. So I'd just be interested, Herb, in getting an idea of sort of as we spoke about previously, so what these are, of course, why you think they're important, what they say about our culture and society, maybe our economy, and whether they're sort of a local problem now, or do they have global implications? Is this something that's sort of a post-industrial global economic thing, or is it an American thing? So what's your take on all that?
Well, so one of the things that, well, first of all, yes, this has really started to come up over the last couple of months, certainly, and even more pronounced in the last few weeks. But the term, the big term right now is quiet quitting, and quiet quitting is basically apathy in the workplace as the greatest amount, and at the smallest amount would be that you just do what is expected of you.
Yeah.
And then prior to that, we had probably about 6 months ago is when, they've been talking about, and even up to a year ago, talking about the Great Resignation. And that is where organizations couldn't find employees. And it's because they resignated from the point of not coming to work. And so these are things that are coming to the attention of a lot of us today, or not to me. I've kind of been away, kind of felt that this has been going on for almost a decade and a half, and I'll explain that. But what happened is with the pandemic, most Americans, compared to other employees in other countries, basically work all the time. We work all the time. We define who we are through work. And organizations are not mandated to give us time off. And so the most competitive environment of time off is 2 weeks. Now, some organizations might offer 3 weeks. If you're an executive, you might get 4 weeks. But the average person is really at about 2 weeks. And then what happens is because they're a lot of times they're indebted because they have so many expenses, they may not even take those 2 weeks off. So you've got to understand, think about if you've been working for 10 years and you really, the only time off that you might get sometimes is a day or two off on the weekends. So when the pandemic hit and people were mandated to spend more time at home, people started to really enjoy this. Suddenly, I can spend time with my kids, I can spend time with my dog, I can do some gardening, all the things that we talk about in life that enriches us. And so then what happens is pandemic kind of goes away and it's, hey, back to the way that we were. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the employees and people go, I'm not too sure I really want to do all of that. I'm kind of like this. Not to mention, before companies would say, stay at home, work out of the house. And employees proved to their organization that they could be somewhat productive out of the home and everything else. And so anyway, it's been a kind of an arduous, slow, resistant way in almost all disciplines. Now, some people enjoy working out of an office. That's fine. And also let me also qualify that the whole Great Resignation and the quiet quitting, that's not necessarily the majority of people, okay, right out the gate, but it's significant. And that's why we're talking about it. We're talking about it because there is a significant amount. If it was 30% of the population, and what that does to productivity is pretty significant. If that's 50% of people who come into work and all they do is the minimum, okay, or or they don't want to do a little extra and see what more they could do, that certainly affects productivity. So to really answer your question, more so than anything else, it's what the COVID really kind of jump started to what we have today. But kind of going back to the last couple of decades, organizations unfortunately have been doing a very poor job at luring people once they're in the workplace. We're very good at recruiting people. Hey, come and join our organization. You're going to love it. Thanks for being here. We love you and all that kind of stuff. But once they get in, okay, suddenly, the honeymoon's over. All right. And then it's this real bad marriage is really what it is. And they abuse employees. They don't set up the way that they stated that we're going to do it. Their incomes don't go up. There's no training. The culture can be not supportive of maybe some of the cultural factors that might exist with a particular individual. So what happens is you promised me all these things, and then at the end of the day, it never really happened. And so in the field of business and industrial psychology, there's a term that we use, and it's called the psychological contract. You may have heard about it. I think I use one of these examples in my book, and that is a psychological contract is an unwritten rule that the expectation that the employee has of the employer and the expectation that the employer has of the employee. And before, when it was safety, taking care of me, having the ability to move up through the ranks of the workplace, Nowadays the expectation is they're not going to take care of me. I won't get pay increases, and so on and so forth. So right out the gate, even though the person wants the job, the expectation is lower. And then the other thing too is the employer looks at the employee and saying, if we don't do what they really want or whatever, they're probably going to go ahead and leave anyway. So now this whole expectation is even brought down even more too. So these are the factors that are affecting this kind of thought process, and then what really happens in the workplace.
Yeah, that's really. That really hits the nail on the head, and it raises so many interesting questions. As well as, I don't know if you guys noticed, I was watching PBS. I mentioned this to Herb last night when I called him in preparation for to tell him about get him ready for this appearance. The Surgeon General just issued this very big report on mental health in the workplace, saying that's they're both interrelated, obviously, and they affect one another. And mental health in the workplace obviously has implications far beyond the workplace. One of the things I thought was interesting that you were saying is how people, because of in the aftermath of this sort of COVID, I don't know what you call it, working from home, home commuting sort of environment, is that workers developed new expectations, which had a lot to do with these mental health in the workplace factors that perhaps weren't a concern of corporations prior to this phenomenon. But I'm thinking America, the United States of America, very well might have a much different attitude and toward work environments in that regard, say, and this is one of your areas of specialty, that's why I'm asking, than say Europe, like say the EU countries. So that Europeans perhaps who went through the whole COVID thing like we did can't come back to work, and this is just a guess, they come back to work and they're like, well, things weren't that much different because my corporation was already thinking about stuff like this more. And whereas in the United States, was this a different or bigger kind of problem?
Well, this is what happens. So what we did is, we look at the other advanced Western countries, right? We look at Germany, we look at France, we look at Spain, we look at the Netherlands and everything else, and we see, why aren't they going through, the Great Resignation? Why aren't they going through quiet quitting, right?
Yeah.
And
are they?
Right. And they're not going through that. Now,
Okay.
there's no doubt that some individuals in a lot of these countries where they stayed at home, they're saying, hey, why can't I stay at home? There's no doubt about that. But the point is because they would get 4 and 5 and 6 weeks off. Okay. Yeah. The whole idea of spending time at home with family, whatever, they've got that. And I think I was talking to you a little bit about, sick time. They don't have 10 days of sick time. Sick time is infinite. Okay. They don't put a number. You can only be sick for 10 days out of the year. I mean, I mean, America just, we quantify everything so ridiculously. So what happens is, and that's the point. And the point is with a lot of these other countries and everything else, they kind of go back to, okay, yeah, we stayed home and we did what we needed to do. The other thing too is, a lot of these other countries have a more collective idea and thought and culture. So they have friends at work. Work is a nurturing environment for them to some degree. Not always, but there is that. Whereas really, we talk about work being a nurturing environment here in the United States, but it's really not. It does create and cause more stress. We do put stress on, and don't worry. I mean, I totally understand about stress to encourage us and solve problems and everything else. But we're not talking about that kind of stress. We're talking about the stress of, if you don't make the numbers, we'll find somebody else who will. If you don't make it to work at this time, so there's a lot of that threatening behavior, or even underlying threatening behavior that we have here, which in a way, in a lot of these other advanced countries, I say advanced, I mean, even if you go to South America, they just don't behave this way. And so our thought process about what work represents And really, this is more modern than it has been because even in the United States in the in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where we're pretty productive or whatever, it really wasn't to the degree where it is today. Today, it's really we create this just real difficult environment that we have to try to navigate, and I think this is what's causing a lot of this.
Very interesting. Go ahead.
It's a very interesting argument, Dr. Ricardo. And this is something new for me, and it's really interesting that people are quitting jobs during COVID-19, and there's a whole lot of things going on: psychological, economic, cultural. So I was thinking, because I'm not, I don't belong to the discipline. I come from political science, conflict resolution discipline. So I was thinking that because we talk about happiness, we talk about jobs. So does this development challenge the conventional notion on happiness, about happiness? Because the usual convention, as I understand, is you do a job or money and keep your family happy, right? But as you were talking about that, people, because of COVID-19, they're working from home and they spend more time with family, kids, and pets. And they value that more than perhaps going to job or doing a job. So again, this is kind of larger thought that comes to my mind, that does this development challenge the conventional notion about happiness we have? And what are the implications or repercussions of that kind of development? So if you can elaborate on that, that would be great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, sure. Excellent. Terrific question. And thank you so much. And we do measure the happiness quotient, and quality of life, right? When we're looking at organizations and countries, especially with international business, and the thing is it's a really interesting question because we do, obviously, we find a lot of happiness at home with our family and our children and our hobbies and what we do. But you know what? We find a lot of happiness at work. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the things a lot of countries loved about America, that Americans love to work. We loved to do things. I mean, we were excited about marketing the jeans to the 14-year-olds and to the 16-year-olds, creating this new additive for this cereal. I mean, we got jazzed up about what nobody else did. And we exported that. Now, again, that doesn't take away from our happiness at home, but actually it supported a lot of our happiness at home and everything else. And so what happened is, I think really what's happened in the last couple of decades is that we're not finding that happiness at work. So then we're only finding that happiness at home. And I think that's exactly what happened. So then when they were spending more time, they're going, gosh, I just feel much better, and I don't even know if it was even necessarily happiness because you even heard about some people saying, oh my gosh, I'm spending more time with my children than I ever really needed or wanted to in a silly way kind of thing, right? But the point though is it's so difficult to navigate the workplace these days and not finding that happiness, and again, just kind of going a little bit to that happiness, and that is, it's not even that when we're at work that we want to feel so happy and joyful like we do with our family. What we want to do is we want to find contentment. We want to find that we are solving the problems and everything else, and that satisfies us, and that gives us that level of satisfaction, which again we can turn into happiness. On the continuation of continuum would be a slightly higher version of happiness, right? But I think we're just not finding that anymore, and that truly affects everything else that we do. And then certainly when we're back in the home environment, then suddenly the home environment is exponentially even better for us now because we're not at that miserable environment. This is what I think. This is what we're seeing.
Yeah, thank you for that well thought out elaboration. Probably you might be aware of the Himalayan country Bhutan. Bhutan is the only country, probably you know that. They don't have GDP, they have GNH, gross national happiness. Right there, Bhutan is not a rich country, but many Hollywood stars, they go to Bhutan to find happiness. So it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting dynamic at play. So thank you for your thought. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on that, Herb, because I think it's another sequential question after Aurobinda's, is that so we have this trend going on, and I think we've talked about this before, but one thing I think is somewhat unique in your work that I read and hear is that you tend to, unlike most Americans, sort of, if this is too simplistic a term, I'm sorry, but blame the cause of all this sort of dissatisfaction at work more on the work environment and the employers rather than the employees, because the conventional wisdom, and again, that's probably part of the American, Puritan work ethic and everything, and the capitalist spirit as well. You're responsible for your happiness, and if you're not happy at work and you're slacking off because of it, it's your own fault, right? And you'll hear, say, on a Fox News, I've heard them, right, editorial. They're like, well, the reason for this quiet quitting thing is that people don't want to work anymore. Kids are lazy now, and they don't want to work like we did back in the day when when work was really tough, right? And look what we had to do. We walked 10 miles in the snow to get to work, and then we put our noses to the grindstone, and nobody, wanted to be happy. What's all this, namby-pamby left-wing bleeding heart stuff? But you, it sounds like, are saying almost just the opposite, that employers have made the work environment such that, at least in America, such that they've precipitated these problems. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so of course, not everybody says I want my ultimate goal in life is to be the best employee in the world.
Right.
Of course, they don't say that, but what's really interesting, we're professors, we've got students and everything else, and one of the things that unfortunately really offends me is when we look at young people and we say, oh, young people are lazy and they don't want to work. Because I've got 5 classes full of students who are coming to college and university, who ultimately what they want is to find an organization that will care for them, and they will empty the tank. They will come to work every day and do what is necessary, because that's what they want. They want training in their discipline. They want to get better at what they're doing. They want purpose for what they're doing. This is what they want. And for us to think that they don't want that, sure, of course, kids are kids and they want to play and they want to do technology and all that kind of stuff and be on their phones, of course, but can we give them a reason for not to be on it? And I believe we can. I think we were able to do this, the last 100 years. I don't see why we can't do it now. The point is, we're pretty smart individuals, or we think we are, or we're supposed to be, and we're supposed to come up with a way to, if an individual has a value and their value is money, well, then how can we channel money into them to do to do the particular job they want? If they value home life or family life, then how can we get them to do what that we believe for them to do and then spend more time at home? Or if they value moving up through the ranking system, the ladder, or whatever it might be. The point is, yeah, I do. I really believe that we as humans, we like to solve problems. I think we like to share with other people our value. And honestly, one of the only places that you can show value different per individual is in the workplace. Because if you're a husband, you're an equated husband to another person who's a husband. If you're a father, again, you want to be the best father, the best husband, the best wife, the best daughter, a church member, helping out there. But you know what, when you say, I'm a pilot. Wow, you're a pilot? You fly? Yeah, I fly to these different countries or whatever. I'm a nurse. I take care of these patients and everything else. There's so much fulfillment that an organization can just inject, sorry for the metaphor, into the individual about what they do. And then they go out. I bore all my friends and family about how much I love teaching. and my organizations and my institution and everything else. But you know what? But then ultimately, what do they want? They want me to be happy. They're happy when they see that I'm happy. And then when I hear about my friends and what they're doing, hey, I'm a mechanic, and hey, guess what? I was helping this one particular problem. Go, wow, look at that. And so again, that's kind of back to, what I'm writing my book. And that is, we can create the environment that we want for our society, just like a government has to create a society for their people and their citizens. We as employers have to raise those citizens, have to raise those employees, have to raise the individuals who work for us. We have to teach them some of the things, it's not just even the workplace. We teach them, how to act in life and the environment outside. One of the examples I often use is, years ago when I was a lot younger and everything else, my boss was telling me, he goes, do you own a house? And I said, well, not yet. And he goes, well, you know what? You need to go ahead. There's something about, you need an investment. You need to plant your roots and everything else. Well, you know what? I know some families will share that, but sometimes you don't get that. So what? You can get that from the workplace. You can get, if your bosses and your colleagues care about you, it's back to that citizenship that the institution offers you. And, church is an institution, family is an institution, school's an institution, but so is the workplace. And it has a lot of influence on us.
Yeah. So what has diminished is the workplace the workplace's sense of community and employers' sense of responsibility for fostering that community. Is that, in a nutshell, kind of where you think the fundamental problem is?
I think that organizations have recognized that instead of necessarily investing in the employee, what you'll do is you'll just invest in the organization itself, in the sense of the physical locations and everything else. And you clearly want more out of an employee, but what you're just going to go ahead and do is you're going to actually take away the things that actually satisfy them in order to get them to, feel threatened in the environment. And then, hopefully they'll work hard for you. And because of course they've got, they've got responsibilities at home, they have to pay for whatever they have to do. Yeah. And when things like training, creating a better work environment, giving more time off, these things are costly. And what they're recognizing is it's a return on investment. It's an ROI to whether or not there's going to be that much difference. So in other words, if we train employees and spend that money, how much more is that employee worth to us? So like, in other words, are they going to treat the customer any better? And if they do treat that customer a little bit better, does it matter to the customer? And I think they're hedging that bet that training the employee, taking care of the customer doesn't make that much of a difference. Why would we go ahead and do that? And you know what? The customer still needs us. The customer, there's only about 3 other places for the customer to go. And and on top of all that, we can make more money from it. So I think these hedging these characteristics on the wealth of the institution or the organization, and of course, more and more, with larger companies and everything else, it's about market share and everything else, stock options and all that kind of stuff, that, the company is just trying to hold on to as much money as possible. So, how do we really squeeze out of these, what we call these kind of like these soft skills in employees? Machines we still need, right? We still machines to do the, but maybe we can operate machines with less people. And unfortunately, that's what we've gone. And, we can go into the talk about, executive pay gone up where regular hourly and up to like a middle management position has not gone up over the last couple of decades. So, it's a combination of it. It's a very holistic look at this.
Yeah. So I guess, go ahead.
Just to add to your point, Rich, just to add to your question. And Dr. Ricardo was talking about the holistic environment. So can you say that the economic system itself has to be blamed partly, because when you look at the capitalist system, which is oriented towards profits, right? Profit and profit making. So I was thinking about that. So can you say that because, and you also talked about that uh, they're kind of hedging the,
Mm.
the business owners, the companies. So can you say that because they just care about profit, they don't worry about the human or empathetic considerations? So can you say that? And another theory, probably social capital, because of the technology, internet, social media, we don't need people, we need more technology. I think you just alluded to that. So what do you think about these two arguments? Like, one is profit, it's profit, and we don't need too much human interactions. We need more technology. So what do you think about these two things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And you know what, I talk about the difference between capitalism and socialism a lot, of course, in my international business class and everything else. And you know, the very interesting thing about talking about these characteristics is that what we tend to do is we tend to equate or we compare old socialism with modern capitalism instead of old socialism and old capitalism, or modern socialism and modern capitalism.
Right.
It's the strangest thing. We only take the old bad versus the new good, and we don't. Okay, so there's that characteristics, and I'll address your point as far as technology and humans. So the point is yeah, they're not mutually exclusive, and that's exactly the point. You know, we know that there are a lot of socialistic countries that do terrifically in the capitalistic environment. The Nordic countries, you know, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway do extremely well in the sense of a socialistic environment. Now, not perfect, clearly not perfect, but they do a pretty good job. But then plus offering you know, support net for individuals. Salaries are fairly good. They're fairly high, and this quality of life is really good. You don't get a lot of Nordic people leaving their country for anywhere else. They stay because, as cold as it is, okay, they stay there because they know what they have. So the point is there's no doubt that that technology is moving further and further, you know, up the ranks as far as value to work, and you know, and there's technology that can take over a lot of, you know, the human position and everything else. But I think there's no doubt that for quality of life and quality for the organization, and I think they can still make money. Yeah, what's going to happen is yeah, it might cut down some of their profits. There's no doubt about it. I use one of the examples of the cell phone. You know, and you know, this is a phone. This is a modern telephone, and you can't get a human on the other end when you've got a problem with your phone. It's only technology, and it frustrates the heck out of, you know, and it's only when you exhaust all the characteristics of the technology that you get a human. By that time, you're angry, you're frustrated. You know, and then the other person, that's all they're doing. They're listening to people miserable the whole time. Kind of going back to your position, you know, of Buddhism. You know, we live in this interconnected world. It's about emotion. It's about love. It's about care, and we've created not only this concrete physical jungle that we navigate, but now what we're creating is these technology barriers to human interaction. And I'm hoping that in modern life, the companies that realize that, you know, instead of making, you know, whatever level of profit, if they could bring it down to only 80% or to 70%, and that 30% makes a difference, that then individuals would want to interact with that particular company because those employees are happier. The customers get a better sense of care, and then ultimately, our environment that we live in, whether physical or the universe of interacting with people, becomes better for us.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Jump in. This is a really interesting and for me exciting conversation. I just want to maybe take it on a slight tangent because you mentioned the Nordic countries, like Norway, Finland, Sweden. What happened to Sweden? It eventually went far right, turned far right. And will this affect its, somewhat socialistic economy by going this route? Because I really haven't paid too close attention. I've been mostly paying attention to the Ukraine, but not to Sweden. And to Italy, I paid attention to Italy more than Sweden as well. So if you can discuss what happened to Sweden.
Yeah, well, again, one of the things that there's no doubt, and that's why I say it's clearly not perfect, these particular countries, because it's not just Sweden, but then also what happened in Norway, bringing over a lot of immigrants from Syria and everything else. And at the beginning, it was kind of okay, but then it was too much. And then, there was a backlash. So I completely get it, and Sweden is clearly was this model for many, many years until it kind of imploded on itself. And people say, no, we want Sweden to be the way it used to be, and everything else. I get it. And there's no doubt that there's a lot of this internally, looking at our country the way it used to be, right? Historically, our country behaved this way. Globalization is difficult. There's no doubt about it, and no country to this day has found that perfect. Every single country has some kind of thing that doesn't necessarily work. The reason why I use the examples of the Nordic countries is because they were the closest ones to be able to balance the ability of being able to serve their citizens with some support network, but also quality of life went up. One of the things with Sweden is because they are a rich country, they're able to have this dialogue about, is this the way we really want to be? And I'm not so sure we do. And let's go back to the way we were, right? Whereas when you're looking at Ukraine, they're not looking at that, and Ukraine, up until the war, I remember being in Kiev, that was one of the most optimistic countries in the world. When I was walking through Kiev and I was talking to people and everything else, this was 2014. They had just finished up one war or whatever, but they were feeling optimistic. They were getting ready. They're like, no, we want to be one of the other EU countries and everything else. So anyway, so kind of going back to this, that you're right. You're absolutely correct that there are problems that are affecting these other countries, but I think that at least at the beginning, the political environment, the way we're going to treat our citizens and everything else, the thought process behind that as a collective environment was going in the right direction. And the companies, this is what the other thing too is the companies followed suit. The companies were in lockstep with the government. Now, yes, now what's happening is you're having a lot of insular thought going on, and there's no doubt that the other countries are probably going to somewhat even follow suit. I see Norway might be starting to fall into that. Denmark could easily do that. So I don't know. Maybe in 10 or 15 years from now, they're going to be awful. I mean, I'm hoping not. Let's not. But I know they're going to have that internal turmoil about how much we're willing to offer to others. And Italy, we know that Italy is just, they're, having the people coming over, on the boats and everything else and landing on there, they're like, we can't handle this. And I get it. And I get it. I get the idea of, all these countries, rich or whatever that they have, they can't be sustaining everybody from just coming over. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent point. I think it's an excellent point to recognize that just because you're a socialistic country and you've got some money, that doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect, because it clearly won't.
Sounds like what you're describing in Sweden has some parallels here, right? And in terms of immigration, largely, right? Having sort of all of a sudden having to deal with some pressure from immigration in a multicultural environment, not creating a backlash among the population, right? So here, it wound up with the Trump phenomenon, right? And maybe in Europe, it's what is largely contributing to a lot of not only right-wing governments but autocracies, right? I mean, do you think there's that same? Do you think that the same kind of dynamic is involved here and there?
There's no doubt that there's a history in most Western and in our country where there's a pecking order, right? I mean, if you're born in the country, if you look a certain way, you should have certain rights. Immigrants coming in, if they're going to be in our country, that we're going to keep them at a certain level. That's what we're going to do. I mean, not everybody feels this way, thank goodness, but there is a thought process in almost all these countries, right? To some degree. I think what happens is when the other factors start to infringe on you, those become more powerful. So in other words, in the 80s, we had Mexicans and Guatemalans, we had immigrants coming in here. Nobody cared about them whatsoever. It didn't matter. Why? Because they were in the fields, okay, and they were picking oranges and they were picking tomatoes or whatever they were doing, okay, and we were reaping the benefits from that. We didn't give them houses to live in. They were living in just poor environments, but our government allowed that. Businesses were fine with that, and we were okay, and they were coming through, okay, and they were still sending money out to their families in these other countries and everything else, right? But then what happens is 20 years later, 30 years later, okay, suddenly they're saving a little bit of their money. Now they're becoming business owners. Okay, now they're up on our roofs and everything else, but the truck is still owned by them and everything else. And it just starts to go like this. And then suddenly we start looking at things like, well, our healthcare system is not that good. Well, it's because they're taking our healthcare system. You know what I mean? And again, I love to talk about the political thought process about what goes on with, the individual and how they vote and okay. But I think what happens is, these are true narratives that people start to feel, and it's because they're not being educated. And I think, and again, this is my point. My point is when you work in an environment, I don't think you should be telling people how to vote. Absolutely not. I don't think the workplace is an environment, but you know what the environment, the workplace is to help educate. Okay. I talk a lot about social responsibility. All the organizations that I've ever been affiliated with and worked with, whatever, I've encouraged my employees to go out and do volunteer work, help underprivileged individuals, regardless of whatever that particular organization happens to be. So when you start doing that, then what you're doing is you're connecting more somebody who's making $80,000, $90,000 a year, $40,000 a year, they're going out and they're painting a house for somebody. They're taking kids and they're reading books to older people. So now we don't discard older people, because why? Because we see the value of what they are and who they are in our society and everything else. So again, I think that a corporation or companies and organizations can influence government in that sense to say, look, this is what we believe that needs to happen. Again, not to the point where they're going to go broke doing this. I'm not putting all my employees out to pasture and everything else and having them do so much good that they're not doing their work. Of course not. But there's a relationship here where when you've got employees, when you've got an environment with 200 employees and you can turn over, you give all those employees 1 week in the community, help a particular organization that needs support and help, suddenly it changes the fabric of the community. I believe I've seen it, done it. And so again, it doesn't solve Miguel's issue with Sweden out there, but it gets us a little closer to where I think we ultimately really want to be.
Yeah, I mean, imagine harnessing that kind of resource if you had every corporation, every business devote a few days even, right? And having their employees do some kind of, or devote a little bit of money to some kind of community project with which maybe their organization is involved. Not a very traditional capitalist notion. I mean, I could see Milton Friedman, right? The only obligation, the moral obligation a corporation has is to make a profit, and that's the way more organizations should be. The minute they start trying to turn themselves into charities or community service organizations, they're undermining their employees and their stakeholders, and they're there to make a profit. What do you think?
Rich, the point is this is capitalism. That's the whole point. I mean, you go to Publix and they go, will you donate $1 extra to a certain foundation or whatever? And then they go ahead you look on their website and say, we give $100,000. Well, they're not giving it, it's us. We, as customers are doing it. They're not, a lot of times they won't even match it. So they only get what they're taking. And the point is, and if you're going out there and you're wearing your Publix shirt or you're wearing your Walmart shirt, whatever, then what you do is like, wow, look what Walmart's doing. Look what's Publix doing. Look what, Dr. Smith's office is doing. There's a reason why, they support soccer teams and running teams in the community. It's not just because they like the idea. It's because they recognize that their names are all over the place. So I would have to say that this is a marketing ploy just as much as it's something good to do.
Right. That makes sense.
I'm a business guy, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it can live. I think business can live with a good, grand society and caring for people. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. And then I know we're starting to get long in the tooth as far as our time goes, but I don't want to keep you too long. But again, to push that one step further, I was interested to some extent in an idea of yours. I forget where this came from. That because again, it seems, considering the American capitalist ethos, pretty unusual to hear. And I think we've talked about this before, but again, inflation is another really big, huge concern right now, right? It's driving our public policy on many levels, and it's a big problem, right? And we don't seem to be able to get a handle on it, trying to rein it in by raising interest rates and all that kind of stuff, I guess, at least not thus far. And you've made the statement that we should start looking, if we want to talk about inflation, stop sort of shrugging our shoulders and talking about it like it's some sort of a divine act of God that sort of, nobody can do anything about, and have maybe corporations step up and take responsibility for their part in that, namely that they're making record profits still.
while all this is going on. I mean, is that accurate?
Well, it's, I'm not a economist,
Yeah.
although I play one at school. But no, I mean, the point is, everything seems to be a zero-sum game here. This is the problem, it's either this or this. And look at us, the four of us realize, and we're not the only ones, we're not the only four people on the face of the earth that realize that everything is not black and white, 0 to 100. We live in the 50%. And the point is how can you have people not being able to afford certain things, and corporations making record profits, and then in between, we're talking about these, economic indicators that we can't seem to control. The point is corporations are so powerful. Corporations have so much money, they have so much wealth, they have so much leverage, okay, that we've turned it over to a government that actually has less. Corporations have more, okay, and it's the corporations. Again, this is not me being against corporations. I'm totally about making money. I'm all about the United States and what we do. But the point is how can you have high oil and gas prices that people are paying the most amount for, and the oil companies making the most amount of money, and we're talking about oh dear, our poor citizens that can only afford. I mean, at the end of the day, the oil companies have to recognize, yeah, they're going to go ahead and they're going to make a profit, but they're not going to make record profits. They've got to bring some of that money down. They've got to be able to, feed it through to the to our constituents. Same thing with food prices. Okay, they don't have to make what they're doing, and maybe there has to be some government intervention. There's no doubt about that, to help and support, and all that kinds of. But it's not this. We've kind of gone back to this whole idea that somehow a year from now we put somebody else in office or whatever, and everything corrects itself. That's not. The reason it's correcting itself is people are working, companies are recognizing they might do with a little bit less, but nobody really talks about that. So at the end of the day, when economists are looking at these numbers, really, you need to start talking. I think government ought to be talking with businesses and saying, listen, you have a pretty good ride with us. People buy your products. We use your services and everything else. It's time for you to give back a little bit. You help us correct the environment. You bring some of your prices down. And I believe, this is mine, and maybe I'm naive to all this. I don't think so. I try to read data, The Economist or whoever I'm reading, and I'm looking at these numbers and I'm reading what's going on. And to me, it just seems like if corporations were a part of it, then I think we'd find that there'd be more correction, and it wouldn't be quite as difficult on people. And that's I know it sounds simplistic, and I'm sorry if it does, but I really do that.
Well, that's where all the money is, right? I guess.
Yeah, resources.
Yeah, that's where the money and resources are, and yeah, so I can see that. It just, even to me, who's got quasi-socialist leanings, I guess, put my cards on the table. I guess I'm sympathetic to a lot of those ideas, of course, capitalist that I am. I think it sounds like we were talking, and it sounded pretty radical to me, the notion of, wow, so you're saying corporations should literally say, okay, we can make all this profit. We have this opportunity to make 1,000% profit now, and you're telling us to put a cap on our prices and only make 500%? It seems almost sacrilegious, right? It just seems like a taboo you're violating almost, let alone let's say the government telling corporations that they have to do this. Incidentally, does that happen? Like, I know it would happen in managed state capitalism, like in China or someplace. Obviously, they'll tell the corporations what to do. But how about in, say, the Nordic countries? Is the state that interventionist that they'll do that? That they'll tell corporations what they got to do as far as things like that go?
Yeah, there's more sense of regulation. I think, we're moving in a way where governments are intervening less, but there are still some governments who do meet with the CEOs and the executives of the particular corporations and companies and industries specifically, and
Mhm.
say, we've got to be able to do this, in the national interest. So there's a fair amount of that going on. And, again, I think, without getting into, again, economics or the political environment, whatever, back in the 80s under the Reagan administration, again, whether you're a fan or not, doesn't matter. But towards the end of that, through deregulation, deregulation means, as we all know, less regulation on the particular industry. And when you do that, you turn it over to the industry to make the determinations and the decisions. And back to the question that you had just said, how can we expect a corporation or a company to regulate itself and not do well? That's right. It's difficult. So you would hope, even though the corporation, the companies recognize that they're part of the society, that they should do well. But no, it does take a government to intervene in that sense and influence what actually happens.
And I guess they do that in the Nordic countries, for instance, with the ones that don't have, like the United Kingdom in their healthcare industry, a completely socialized one, but the ones that just have sort of a free enterprise kind of one, but managed largely, right, by the state. So I guess in that case, you have sort of a government managed but still capitalist competitive healthcare system, right?
I think that a lot more of the European countries and maybe some of these Scandinavian countries, there's more of a conversation between industry and government, and because again there's a fair amount of stability in the economic indicators over the last 20 years, more so than we've had here.
I think fascinating discussion. I think it's a lot of interesting points and very relevant and useful for sure. So thank you, Dr. Ricardo. And I think you have been to many parts of the world. You went to Kiev, and we talked about Ukraine in passing. We talked about Italy, Sweden, and so there are a lot of changes happening in international politics. And if you look at United States, the political debates, a lot of things are happening now. So what is your expertise? What does your expertise tell about the development? Let me ask you in a very simplistic way. So are you optimistic about the developments? Because I come from conflict resolution background, so I look at kind of larger picture in terms of peace and development. So what is your assessment of international trade, international politics? Are you optimistic about the future? So what is your general take on this?
I think we're right now we're going through a difficult time through international trade and relationships within countries. I mean, my gosh, just look what happened in Great Britain. As much as England's a small country, I actually grew up there, but even as small as it is, it's a force of stability for Europe to some degree. Anyway, so we've got the war going on in between Russia and Ukraine going on right now, and everything else. We've got China and Taiwan going on. You're not hearing too much going on in Africa right now because of everything else that's going on. So to answer that question, as much as I'm pensively watching everything. I do believe I am optimistic. It's a hard word to use right now, I'll be honest with you, but I am optimistic in the sense that once maybe a couple of these things are sorted out, things will kind of normalize. And but I'm thinking we're looking at about 5 to 7 years. If we go in a correct trajectory, and I'm optimistic that we will, but I don't think a lot of the relationship strength and building. I think we're almost at the low. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I think we're at the lowest right now, and I think over the next couple of years, we're going to start building on that, recognizing that we cannot be this way. And back to what I think that there's going to be companies who are going to be part of recognizing that, because it's through trade and commerce, right? That helps other countries. So hopefully there's that. I don't think that the relationship between the United States and China is as strained as we tend to hear on media, TV, or whatever we read. I think there's an actual stronger relationship there, trade-wise. Okay, so that's what I think.
There is a famous saying that when trade crosses borders, soldiers don't. Like, it is a famous saying. But if you look at, because I am from international politics, a conflict resolution background, so the liberal theory of classical liberal theory of interdependence, it's kind of challenged now. I mean, it's kind of ideas, ideologies, the realist theory that seems to be dominant now. And so I'm glad to notice that you are optimistic, and I share your optimism too. And I hope in 5-7 years we see better things, at least more dialogue, more diplomacy, more engagement, like you said that. So yeah, so we can hope that.
Can I make one comment? And
Yeah,
that
please.
I think the X factor here is India. I am waiting for India to become so powerful, because India is I call it like a sleeping lion or whatever, and I want technology and the healthcare and all the great minds that is being harnessed there, that when India starts to become more powerful, I'm hoping, because of the way that they think and the thought process of the historic Indian philosophy and their culture, that maybe that could be a stabilizing factor for the world. This is only me. I haven't read this anywhere, but this is just how I think. But I'm hoping for that.
Excellent. Wow, that was just such a great note to maybe end this conversation on. Optimism, brotherhood, international peace. They're all great themes. So is there any other concerns or anything else that anybody wants to add?
I just want to, I wish this wouldn't end, because it's such a wonderful conversation. Real quick, just to add regarding England, and what's going on, I think that's a telltale sign, and probably some hope, as Herb has mentioned recently, that there may be some light at the end of the tunnel, because when former Prime Minister Liz Truss tried to reduce taxes for the wealthy, and do some other measures that the United States actually did, during the Trump administration, but even to probably a larger extent, a more exponential extent, the citizenry and the markets and the businesses kind of rebelled. So I don't know if you want to add any more to that, Herb. You're the expert on England more than us, but.
Well, what you're saying is absolutely 100% correct. As much as the English don't want any more taxes raised, what's worse than that is to give rich people a tax break. Okay, and the English realize that the taxes pay for their health care, for the transportation that they get, and everything else. So, so you're absolutely correct, Miguel, in what you just said, that you know, when a government looks to kind of squeeze the citizens will come back stronger. And that's exactly, you know, in this sense, Parliament basically said, no, we cannot take this. We're not going for this one. And so that's what, so yeah, without going into, you know, back into Boris Johnson and everything else all the way back. Although that might be bouncing forward, right? So that's a whole other but yeah, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. And these are, you know, these are very modern, these are very modern economic models, that what's happening is what we're looking at, what we're noticing is that all the countries are using kind of the same economic models, right? I mean, we had so many different variables and variations before, but it's almost like we become lazy and said, this is the only way we can do it. We can only increase interest rates or decrease interest rates. We can only, you know, give tax breaks, or we can only give more tax. You know, there's so many myriad of different ways that we can do it, but it just seems that recently, you know, in the last couple of decades, we're defaulting to only a couple of ways to solve problems. And I think that's a problem too.
Fair enough. Now, see, you guys were just on, you hit such a high note and now you just depressed me again. So that's fascinating, really fascinating. Thanks so much, Herb, for joining us. I don't know if Miguel, you want to, anybody else?
Thank you for joining.
This is a fascinating discussion. And if you want to take us home.
Again, this is absolutely fascinating, and thank you for coming. I hope to see you again sometime. Thank you.
Well, we'd like to invite you back. I hope this is not one and done and never again. No, definitely this was an exciting conversation, and we'd like to invite you back for part 2 and part 3 and continue. There's so much to talk about. We've only it was only the tip of the iceberg that we touched on today.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed reading and looking at your website and everything else, and you got some great content there, and it's helped me. I've shared some of this with my students in my organizational ethics class. So thanks for the opportunity. It's been terrific. It's been a great hour spent with them, you all. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you again. And with that said, for our viewers, if you enjoyed this video, please click like and subscribe and join us on our website, infinitediscoveries.org. That's infinitediscoveries.org. Thank you, everyone. Until next time, take care.